They say blood is thicker than water, but they never tell you what to do when your own blood is trying to bleed you dry. For 30 years, I was the rock, the foundation, the endless checking account for my son and his wife. Then, after one final, breathtakingly cruel insult, I won the vacation of a lifetime, a 14-day Alaskan cruise. I offered them a chance to join me, a final olive branch. They laughed in my face. So I hung up the phone and made one more call, this one to my bank. They thought my generosity was a river. They were about to find out I had just built a dam. You won't believe what I did next. And that was just the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Part 1, The Bank of Dad. The silence in my house is a living thing. It's been my primary companion since my wife, Susan, passed away 5 years ago. It's a comfortable silence most days. It settles in the worn armchair where she used to read. It pools in the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun, slanting through the windows of my workshop, and it hums along with the old refrigerator in the kitchen. I know its moods. I've learned its rhythms. I'm a retired contractor, a man who spent 40 years shaping wood and stone into homes for other people. I understand foundations. And for the better part of my adult life, I had served as the foundation for my only son, Mark. I live in Spokane in the same modest 3-bedroom house Susan and I bought in 1988. It's a good house, strong bones. I laid the hardwood floors myself, built the deck out back with my own 2 hands, and planted the oak tree in the front yard that now towers over the roof. My hands are gnarled and scarred from a lifetime of honest work, calloused reminders of deadlines met and projects completed. I still drive my 15-year-old Ford F-150. Its cab smells faintly of sawdust and coffee, and the driver's side door groans like an old man getting out of a chair. My flannel shirts are worn soft at the elbows, and my work boots, though resoled 3 times, are more comfortable than any pair of slippers. I live a simple life because it's the only one that's ever made sense to me. My son Mark and his wife Tiffany live a different life. They reside in a sprawling, 5-bedroom new build on the South Hill, the kind of place with a 3-car garage and a kitchen that looks like a showroom for a high-end appliance company. It's a house designed to be photographed for social media, all white marble and brushed gold fixtures. It's cold, impersonal, and utterly devoid of character. It's a house I paid the down payment on. All $50,000 of it, a significant chunk of the retirement nest egg Susan and I had so carefully built. It's an investment, Dad, Mark had explained, his voice echoing with the talking points Tiffany had clearly drilled into him. The property values here are skyrocketing. It's for Aiden's future. Aiden is my grandson. He's 6 years old and I love him with a ferocity that aches, but I rarely see him. Tiffany prefers he have structured playdates with the children of her friends, other women who spend their days documenting their curated lives on Instagram. The few times I have visited, I felt like a tourist. Tiffany would trail behind me, subtly wiping down any surface I touched, her smile as bright and hard as a diamond. The river of money flowing from my quiet, sensible world into their glossy, extravagant one had started small. When Mark was in college, I covered his rent and bills so he could focus on his studies. He graduated with a degree in communications and a distinct aversion to any kind of manual labor. Then came the wedding. Tiffany's parents, the Allisons, were what you might call comfortably wealthy and deeply image-conscious. They offered to pay for half of the wedding, a lavish affair at a golf resort. I was expected to cover the other half. I wrote the check without complaint, watching my savings account shrink because it's what a father does. Susan was still alive then, though the illness was already taking its toll. She squeezed my hand under the table at the rehearsal dinner and whispered, "Just make sure he's happy, Frank." I promised I would. It was a promise that would cost me dearly. After the wedding, the requests became more frequent, more audacious. They needed a new car because their old one wasn't safe enough for a baby. So I co-signed a loan for a gas-guzzling luxury SUV that cost more than my first house. Tiffany wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, which was fine. But her version of it involved daily yoga classes, expensive lunches, and a wardrobe that was constantly being updated. Mark's job as a marketing consultant was vague, and from what I could gather, not particularly lucrative. So I supplemented their income. Every month, a quiet, automatic transfer of $2,000 left my account and entered theirs. It was for essentials, Mark assured me, groceries, the mortgage. Aiden's private preschool, where 6-year-olds apparently learned Mandarin and mindfulness. I saw the evidence of their essentials on Tiffany's Facebook page. Weekend trips to Seattle for a little retail therapy. Professional photo shoots in pumpkin patches. Extravagant birthday parties for Aiden with petting zoos and bouncy castles that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to be. All of it was meticulously documented, hashtagged, and presented as the fruits of their own hard work and success. There was never a mention of me. I was the silent partner, the invisible investor in the startup of their perfect family life. The dark humor of it all wasn't lost on me. I'd be eating a bowl of chili made from budget ground beef, sitting at the simple oak table I built for Susan as a wedding gift, and I'd scroll through photos of them dining on oysters and champagne. I'd patch a hole in my favorite jeans while looking at a picture of Tiffany showing off a new $500 handbag. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife, but I kept writing the checks. I kept the automatic transfers flowing. A promise is a promise. My own dreams had been put on hold so long they'd started to gather dust. Susan and I had always talked about traveling. We had a jar on the kitchen counter where we'd put our spare change, labeled Alaskan Cruise Fund. We'd watch the travel shows, mesmerized by the glaciers and the whales. We'd debrowse brochures, planning the excursions we'd take, the quiet moments we'd share on the balcony, watching the world drift by. But then Mark needed help with college tuition. Then he needed a down payment for his first condo. Then Susan got sick, and all our money, all our energy went into her care. The jar was emptied to pay for prescriptions. The brochures were put away in a drawer. After she was gone, the thought of going alone was just too painful. So I stayed home, fixed my leaky faucet, and paid for my son's ever-escalating definition of happiness. The foundation had to hold. It was all I had left. Part 2, the Thanksgiving betrayal. The final straw wasn't a grand, dramatic explosion. It was a small, quiet, and utterly soul-crushing act of casual cruelty. It happened, as so many family tragedies do, around a holiday. Thanksgiving was always Susan's favorite. She loved the chaos, the smell of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie filling the house, the cacophony of family crowded around the table. Since she'd passed, I had tried to keep the tradition alive. I wasn't much of a cook, but I could manage. The first couple of years, Mark and Tiffany had come over, though they spent most of the time on their phones, and Tiffany would subtly push the food around her plate, later posting a picture of a light Thanksgiving salad she'd eaten in Stee. This year, about a month before the holiday, Tiffany called me. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone I had come to recognize as the preamble to a significant financial request. "Frank, hi," she chirped. "I was just thinking, with Thanksgiving coming up, it's just so much work for you to host. And our kitchen is so much bigger, it just makes more sense for us to have it at our place this year. It'll be so much easier for you." I knew what was coming. Easier was code for more expensive for me. "That's thoughtful of you, Tiffany," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Well, you know me, always thinking," she laughed, a tinkling sound that always set my teeth on edge. "The thing is, I found this amazing local caterer. They do a whole organic, farm-to-table Thanksgiving spread. It's a little pricey, but you know how important it is for Aiden to eat clean. We were just wondering if you'd be willing to, chip in, as your contribution to the meal." "Chip in?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "How much is the spread?" There was a brief pause. "It's about $1,500, she said, as if she were talking about $15. "But it includes everything. Heritage turkey, gluten-free stuffing, heirloom root vegetables, all the good stuff. $1,500 for one meal." I thought about the $50 butterball turkey I usually bought. I thought about the years of scrimping and saving, the vacations never taken. I looked at the picture of Susan on the mantelpiece, her warm, genuine smile a world away from Tiffany's calculated charm. But then I thought of Aiden, of seeing my grandson on a holiday. "All right, Tiffany," I sighed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Send me the invoice, I'll take care of it." "Oh, Frank, you're the best," she gushed. "This is going to be the best Thanksgiving ever." I paid the bill online the next day. A confirmation email arrived in my inbox. "Thank you for your order. Your Thanksgiving feast for the Miller family has been paid in full." I felt a familiar pang of resentment, followed by the dull resignation that had become my constant calm. Panion, the week of Thanksgiving, arrived. I hadn't heard much from them, which wasn't unusual. I assumed I was expected to show up around 2 p.m. on Thursday. I bought a nice bottle of wine to bring, an expensive Pinot Noir that the man at the shop recommended. I even got a small toy for Aiden, a Lego set of a little construction truck I thought he'd like. On Wednesday afternoon, the day before the holiday, my phone rang. It was Mark. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice hesitant. "Listen, about tomorrow." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "What about it, son?" "Yeah, so Tiff and I were talking. And her parents, the Allisons, they just decided to throw a big Thanksgiving thing at their place last minute. It's going to be a pretty formal affair, you know. Black tie and all that." "Really not your scene?" I stood in my quiet kitchen, staring at the oak tree in the front yard, its branches bare against the gray November sky. "Not my scene," I repeated, the words flat and lifeless. "Yeah, and you know how Tiff's mom can be. She's got the whole seating chart planned out, and it's just, well, it would be awkward. We have to go, Dad, for the sake of family harmony." Family harmony. I had just spent $1,500 on family harmony, and now I was being uninvited from the family. The dark humor of it was almost too much to bear. "So what about the food, Mark?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "The food I paid for?" "Oh, right. Well, that's the great part," he said, his tone brightening with relief, completely oblivious to the insult he was delivering. "We talked to the caterer. We're having them deliver the whole meal to your house, so you won't have to cook or be alone. It's perfect, right? You get a great meal, and we don't have to worry about you." He said it like he had solved a complex puzzle. He had found a way to take my money, accept a better invitation, and absolve himself of any guilt in a single, elegant maneuver. I was no longer a father to be included, but a problem to be managed. An obligation to be outsourced to a caterer. I looked at the Lego set on my counter. I looked at the expensive bottle of wine. I thought of the silence in my house, a silence I had chosen, but a silence they were now sentencing me to. The foundation didn't just crack, it shattered. "Yeah, son," I said, and the sound that came out of my throat was something I didn't recognize. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place. "Perfect." I hung up the phone. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stood there as the silence rushed back in, colder and heavier than before. The next day, a van pulled up, and a young man delivered a mountain of aluminum trays filled with $1,500 worth of organic, farm-to-table Thanksgiving dinner for one. I left it all on the porch. I went into my workshop, turned on the radio, and spent the day sanding down a piece of old maple until it was perfectly smooth. Part 3, a winning ticket and a closed door. The 2 weeks following the Thanksgiving debacle were a study in quiet detachment. I didn't call them, and they, insulated by their own self-absorption, didn't call me. They probably imagined me contentedly working my way through a refrigerator full of artisanal leftovers, grateful for their largesse. The truth was, I'd given the entire catered meal to the local fire station. The firemen were thrilled, and their genuine gratitude was a balm on a wound I was only just beginning to understand was mortal. Life continued in its simple rhythm. I worked on my projects in the garage, read books by the fire, and had my weekly breakfast with a few other retired guys from the trades. It was at one of these breakfasts that my life took an unexpected turn. My friend Dave, a retired electrician, slapped a raffle ticket down on the table next to my coffee. "It's for the local VFW Post," he said. "They're trying to raise money for a new roof. Grand prize is a cruise. I grunted, pulling a $10 bill from my wallet. Sure, why not? I bought 2 tickets, scribbled my name and number on them, and dropped them into the big drum at the diner's entrance without a second thought. I forgot about it completely until a week later when my phone rang. "Is this Frank Miller?" a booming voice asked. "It is." "Well, Frank, this is Bill from VFW Post 204. I hope you've got your sea legs ready because you just won our grand prize, a 14-day, all-inclusive Alaskan cruise for 4 people. I sat down heavily in my armchair. A cruise, an Alaskan cruise. The irony was so profound, so cosmic, it felt like a punchline to a joke I'd been living for 30 years. The jar on the counter, the brochures in the drawer, Susan's dream, handed to me by chance, for 4 people. My first thought, a reflex born of decades of habit, was of Mark, Tiffany, and Aiden. This could be a bridge, a way to mend the chasm that had opened between us. I could show them the world Susan and I had dreamed of seeing. We could stand on the deck together, watch for whales, and maybe, just maybe, they would see me not as a wallet, but as a father and a grandfather. It was a foolish thought, a testament to the stubborn, irrational hope of a parent, but it was genuine. With a deep breath, I dialed Mark's number. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice distracted. "Hey, Dad, I'm a little busy." "What's up? I have some incredible news, son," I said, allowing a bit of the genuine excitement I felt to creep into my voice. "You're not going to believe it. I won a raffle, a big one." "Oh yeah, what a gift card to Home Depot," he chuckled, the condescension dripping from his words. "No, Mark," I said, my patience fraying. "I won a 14-day, all-inclusive cruise to Alaska in a balcony suite for 4 people. I want to take you, Tiffany, and Aiden. It leaves in May." There was a moment of dead silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard Tiffany's sharp voice in the background. "What is it, honey?" Mark mumbled something, and then I heard her laugh. It was not a kind laugh. It was high and brittle and full of derision. Mark came back on the line. Dad, that's nice of you to offer, really." "But, he trailed off, clearly searching for the right words, likely being fed to him by his wife. "But what?" I asked, my hopes starting to curdle. "Well, first of all, an Alaskan cruise," he said, his tone a mixture of pity and disbelief. "Isn't that for, newlyweds and nearly deads? It's not exactly our vibe. Newlyweds and nearly deads." The phrase hung in the air between us, a perfect distillation of their disdain. I was the nearly dead in their equation, a relic to be managed and tolerated. "Besides," he continued, gaining confidence, "Tiff and I were actually planning a trip to Aspen in the spring. We were going to talk to you about it, actually. It's for a wellness retreat. It's very exclusive." He said it without a hint of shame. He was turning down a free, all-expenses-paid trip of a lifetime while simultaneously teeing me up to fund its much trendier, more expensive replacement. They weren't just declining my gift, they were spitting on it and holding out their hand for cash. That was it. That was the moment the last, stubborn thread of obligation snapped. The promise I made to Susan was to ensure her son was happy, not to enable a pair of entitled, ungrateful grifters who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. My happiness mattered, too. My dreams mattered. A strange calm washed over me. It was the quiet resolve of a man who had finally reached his limit. The decision was made, not in anger, but with the cold, hard clarity of a winter morning. "I see," I said, my voice even. "Well, that's a shame. You'll be missing out." "Yeah, well, maybe next time, Dad," he said dismissively. "Hey, about Aspen." "I have to go, Mark," I interrupted. "Something's come up." I hung up the phone before he could reply. I placed the receiver gently back in its cradle, the click echoing in the silent room. I did not feel rage. I did not feel sadness. I felt light. A 30-year burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I sat at my desk, the cruise confirmation papers spread out before me. For 4 people, I had options. I could invite my friend Dave and his wife. I could ask my cousin from Oregon, or I could do something else entirely. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I made a pot of strong, black coffee and sat at my computer. It was the 1st of the month, the day the $2,000 transfer was scheduled to go to Mark and Tiffany's account. I logged into my online banking portal. My hands were steady. I navigated to the transfers page. There it was, recurring monthly payment to M. Miller. I stared at it for a long moment, thinking of all the things that money represented. The sacrifices, the bitten tongue, the deferred dreams. With a single, satisfying click of the mouse, I hit cancel. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to delete this recurring payment? I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes for the first time in years. Oh, I'm sure, I whispered to the empty room. I clicked confirm. Then I went to the credit card accounts. I was an authorized user on theirs, a formality to help their credit score, which in reality meant I was the one who ended up paying off the balance most months. I found my name, clicked remove authorized user, and confirmed. The digital umbilical cord was severed. The bank of Dad was officially permanently closed. I leaned back in my chair, the morning light just starting to peek over the horizon, and felt a profound sense of peace. They had declined my invitation, so I had declined to fund their lives. It seemed a perfectly fair trade. Part 4, the digital tantrum. For 3 weeks, the silence was beautiful. It was a restorative, healing silence, different from the lonely quiet I had grown accustomed to. It was the sound of freedom. I spent my days in the workshop, whistling along with the oldies station on the radio. I booked a call with the cruise line, and after a pleasant conversation with a woman named Brenda, I used the value of the 3 unused tickets to upgrade my single passage. I was no longer in a balcony suite. I was in the Neptune suite, one of the best cabins on the ship. It came with a private concierge, priority everything, and a welcome bottle of champagne. I told Brenda to have a bottle of good single malt scotch waiting for me instead. She laughed and said it would be her pleasure. The inevitable storm broke on a Tuesday morning. I was enjoying a second cup of coffee and reading the paper when my phone buzzed. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again, and again, and again. 5 missed calls in 3 minutes. Then came the text messages, a rapid-fire barrage of digital panic. Dad, call me. It's an emergency. Did you cancel your credit card? The gas station just declined TIFs. Dad, the mortgage payment bounced. The bank just called. What the hell is going on? Pick up the phone. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the warmth of the mug in my hands. I typed out a single, simple reply. Sounds like a problem, son. I then turned my phone onto silent and placed it face down on the counter. The ensuing tantrum was, I imagine, biblical. A couple of hours later, my curiosity got the better of me. I opened up my laptop and navigated to Tiffany's Facebook page. What I found was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive martyrdom. She hadn't mentioned me by name, of course. She was too clever for that. Instead, she had crafted a long, rambling post, accompanied by a professionally taken photo of her, Mark, and Aiden, all dressed in coordinating beige linen outfits, looking wistfully into the middle distance. The post began, feeling so heartbroken today. It's a terrible lesson to learn that sometimes the people you expect to be your biggest supporters are the ones who try to pull the rug out from under you. Family should be about unconditional love, not financial control and manipulation. It went on, a symphony of vague accusations and self-pity. She wrote about the sudden and shocking withdrawal of promised support and the pain of having to explain to your child why sacrifices have to be made. She painted a picture of herself and Mark as innocent victims, hardworking young parent. TS just trying to give their son the best in life, only to be sabotaged by a toxic, bitter family member who was using money as a weapon. The final paragraph was the real kicker. We will get through this because our little family is strong. Love will always win over bitterness. We are choosing to rise above the negativity and focus on what truly matters. Family over everything blessed resilience breaking the cycle. The comments section was a cesspool of sycophantic support. Oh, Tiff, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Sending you love and light, wrote one of her yoga friends. You are so strong, don't let the haters get you down, wrote another. I know exactly what you mean, commented a woman I'd never heard of. We had to cut ties with my husband's father last year. Some people just can't stand to see the next generation succeed. I had to laugh. It was either that or throw my laptop through the window. They had taken my money for a decade, lived a lifestyle they couldn't possibly afford, and the moment the tap was turned off, they cast me as the villain. It was breathtaking in its audacity. They weren't just ungrateful, they were revisionist historians rewriting the past to fit their narrative of victimhood. The public shaming was meant to do one thing, force me back into line. They assumed I would be mortified. They believed I would see the outpouring of sympathy for them, panic at the thought of my reputation being tarnished, and immediately call them, begging for forgiveness and promising to reinstate their allowance. They had fundamentally misunderstood the man they were dealing with. I had spent a lifetime building things that last. I wasn't about to be rattled by a digital tantrum thrown by a pair of spoiled children. I felt no anger. I felt no desire to log in and defend myself in the comments. Arguing with them would be like wrestling with a pig in mud. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. Instead, I felt a cold, clear sense of purpose. They wanted to talk about finances. They wanted to talk about who supported whom. Fine, let's talk about it, but we would do it on my terms, and we would do it with receipts. Their arrogant counterattack was a declaration of war. They just didn't realize that I was the one with all the ammunition. Part 5. The Ledger of Lies. Every good contractor knows that the most important part of any job is the prep work. You don't start swinging a hammer until you have your blueprints, your materials, and a clear plan. Tiffany's Facebook post was the equivalent of her firing a starter pistol. She thought it was the beginning and end of the fight. For me, it was simply the signal to start my prep work. The next day, I drove my old Ford truck to the local Staples. I walked past the flashy laptops and colorful school supplies and went to the back aisle, the one with the sober, professional-looking accounting materials. I bought a large, green, hardcover ledger book, the kind accountants used before everything went digital. I bought a pack of fine-tipped black pens, a good ruler, and a heavy-duty hole punch. This wasn't going to be a digital fight. This was going to be analog, tangible, irrefutable. When I got home, I cleared off the big table in my dining room, the one that hadn't hosted a family dinner in years, and began my project. I logged into my online banking portal, the same one I'd used to cut them off, and I started printing. I went back a full 10 years, the entire length of Mark and Tiffany's marriage. Page after page spooled out of my old printer, a decade's worth of financial records. Bank statements, credit card bills, records of wire transfers. The stack of paper was nearly a foot high. I spent the next week engrossed in my work. It was methodical, almost meditative. With a ruler and a black pen, I drew neat columns in my new ledger. Date, amount, recipient, purpose. Then I went through the statements one by one. I highlighted every single transaction that was not for my own personal expenses. Every check cashed by Mark. Every credit card charge from a store I'd never set foot in. Every automatic transfer. The numbers were staggering even to me. Seeing it all laid out in one place was like looking at a topographical map of my own foolishness. 50,000, I wrote in neat block letters. M. Miller down payment on 123 Oakwood Lane. 25,000, the Grandview Resort, 50% of wedding costs. $5,245.87, Tiffany Miller emergency, roof repair, later seen on Instagram as patio furniture. I made a small, wry note in the margin for that one. I went through old emails and text messages I'd saved on my computer. I printed them out, hole-punched them, and added them to a growing binder. A text from Mark from 2018. Hey Dad, Tiff's car is making a weird noise. The mechanic says it needs a new transmission. Can you help us out? We're a little short. Beside it, I placed the credit card statement showing the $4,500 charge to the auto shop. An email from Tiffany from 2020, complete with butterfly emojis. Hi Frank, hope you're well. Aiden's birthday is coming up and we want to make it super special since this year has been so hard on everyone. We found the most amazing pony ride company. Here's the link if you want to be the one to make his dream come true. Zoxo. Beside it, the statement showing the $1,200 charge. I compiled the monthly $2,000 transfers. Over 10 years, that alone came to $240,000. It was a number so large it looked like a typo. I documented the car payments, the student loan payments I'd made for Mark years ago, the endless $100 here, $100 there that he'd asked for, which added up to thousands. As I worked, my amusement grew. This wasn't just a ledger, it was a biography. It was the secret history of their perfect, Instagrammable life. The foundation of their marble countertopped castle wasn't hard work or resilience. It was my quiet, steady sacrifice. They had accused me of using money as a weapon. They had no idea what a real weapon looked like. What I was building was not a weapon of anger, but a tool of truth. It was a blueprint of reality, and I was going to use it to demolish their fictional world. By the end of the week, I had it all. The green ledger book was filled with neat, undeniable entries. The binder was thick with printed-out emails, text messages, and statements, all neatly tabbed and organized by year. The grand total, conservatively estimated, was just north of $400,000. I closed the ledger. The cover was cool and smooth under my hand. I felt like a man who had just finished building the sturdiest, most well-crafted structure of his life. I hadn't built it with wood and nails, but with numbers and facts, and it was beautiful. Now all I needed was the right venue for the unveiling. A housewarming, you might say. And I had a feeling the perfect occasion was just around the corner. Christmas was coming. And I knew the Allisons, Tiffany's parents, always threw a lavish Christmas Eve party. They were all about keeping up appearances, and this year I had a strong suspicion I would be on the guest list. They would want to stage a public reconciliation, to pressure me into turning the money back on before the spectacle of their daughter's financial downgrade became public knowledge. They would be setting a trap for me. They had no idea I was the one building the cage. Part 6, The Christmas Reckoning. The invitation arrived, as predicted, in early December. It was printed on thick, creamy cardstock with gold-embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to a Christmas Eve celebration at the home of Robert and Alina Allison. In the bottom corner, a handwritten note from Alina in elegant cursive. Frank, we do hope you'll join us. It's so important for family to be together at this time of year. The manipulation was as thick as the cardstock it was written on. Family, they were going to corner me, surround me with their friends and allies, and use the spirit of Christmas to shame me into submission. It was a perfect plan from their perspective. Their only mistake was in assuming I would play the part of the chastened old fool. I RSVP'd, yes, immediately. Christmas Eve arrived, cold and clear. A light dusting of snow covered the ground, making the world look clean and new. I didn't dress up in a suit. I wore a pair of clean, dark trousers, a pressed flannel shirt, and a handsome wool sweater Susan had given me for my 60th birthday. I looked like what I was, a retired contractor, comfortable in his own skin. Under my arm, I carried a slim, professional-looking leather briefcase. It did not contain a bottle of wine or a festive dessert. It contained the ledger and the binder. The Allisons' house was even more ostentatious than my son's. It was a massive brick colonial, professionally decorated for the holidays with enough white lights to be seen from space. Inside, the party was in full swing. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters in white jackets moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and canapes. It was a world away from my quiet house, a performance of wealth and status. I saw them immediately. Mark, Tiffany, and her parents were holding court by a massive, floor-to-ceiling Christmas tree. Tiffany was wearing a glittering silver dress, laughing a little too loudly at something her father said. Mark looked uncomfortable, constantly adjusting his tie and scanning the room. His eyes met mine, and for a fleeting second I saw panic. Then he was swallowed by the crowd. I didn't engage. I got a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter and found a quiet spot near the fireplace, simply observing. I was a ghost at their feast, a silent witness. They left me alone for the first hour, a tactical decision, no doubt, to let me soak in the atmosphere and feel the social pressure. Finally, Robert Allison, Tiffany's father, made his way over to me. He was a tall man with a carefully maintained tan and the easy, predatory smile of a corporate lawyer. "Frank," he said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Glad you could make it. We need to talk." "I imagine we do, Robert," I said calmly. He guided me to a slightly less crowded study. Mark and Tiffany were already there, waiting. Tiffany had arranged her face into an expression of deep, sorrowful concern. Mark just looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. "Frank," Tiffany began, her voice trembling slightly, "we are so glad you came. We've been so worried. This whole misunderstanding has been just awful." "There's no misunderstanding, Tiffany," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I understand perfectly." "Now listen, Frank," Robert interjected, taking charge. "I think there's been a breakdown in communication. These kids, they depend on you. What you've done, cutting them off so abruptly, it's cruel. It's Christmas. It's a time for forgiveness, for family." "I agree," I said, looking directly at Mark and Tiffany. "So let's communicate. You've been telling people a story about a bitter old man who is using money to control you. I'd like to tell a story of my own. It's a bit more fact-based." I placed my briefcase on the mahogany desk, the clicks of the latches echoing in the tense silence. I took out the green ledger and the thick binder. I opened the ledger on the desk. "You see," I began, my voice clear and steady, "I've been a contractor my whole life. I believe in blueprints, in numbers, in things that add up. And I've been running the numbers on our family. I call this the ledger of lies." Tiffany's eyes widened. Mark went pale. "I won't bore you with the entire thing," I said, flipping through the pages filled with my neat handwriting. "But let's hit the highlights. Robert, Eleanor, as parents, I'm sure you'll find this illuminating. Let's start with the wedding you so generously offered to split. Here is the final bill from the resort, and here is the bank statement showing my payment of $25,000. I turned a page. And then the house, a lovely home. Here is the record of the $50,000 wire transfer for the down payment. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't use angry words. I was simply a man presenting a report. I went on, my voice a calm, relentless metronome of truth. I detailed the car, the preschool tuition, the credit card bailouts, the emergency patio furniture. I detailed the $240,000 in direct monthly support. With each new fact, I would slide a corresponding document from the binder across the polished surface of the desk. "And that brings us to this past Thanksgiving," I said, my voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "Tiffany, you called it chipping in. Here is the invoice from the caterer for $1,500, paid in full by me. And here," I slid a printout of a text message forward, "is the message from Mark, uninviting me from the dinner I had just purchased, suggesting the food be delivered so you wouldn't have to worry about me." Robert Allison, who had started with a look of smug authority, was now staring at the documents, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning fury. Eleanor had her hand over her mouth. "And finally," I said, my voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, "the reason we're all here, your performance on social media." I pushed the printout of Tiffany's Facebook post to the center of the desk. "You call me a manipulator. You accuse me of using money as a weapon. After a decade of funding your entire lifestyle, a lifestyle you present to the world as your own achievement. The total for anyone keeping score comes to just over $437,000. I closed the ledger. The sound was like a gavel. "I didn't come here for an apology," I said, looking at my son and his wife. Their faces were ashen. "I don't want one. I didn't come here to negotiate. The bank of Dad is closed, permanently. I came here tonight simply to set the record straight. You wanted to tell a story about me to your friends and family. I thought it was only fair that they heard the whole story with receipts." I looked at Robert. "Your daughter and my son have built their lives on a foundation of lies and my generosity. As a fellow father, I thought you'd want to see the blueprints." I packed my ledger and binder back into my briefcase, clicked the latches shut, and stood up. I walked out of the study, leaving the four of them in a silence so profound it felt like a vacuum. As I walked through the glittering party, I could feel the eyes of the other guests on me, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. I didn't look back. I walked out into the cold, clean Christmas air, got in my old truck, and drove home. I had given them one last Christmas gift, the truth. It was the one thing I knew for certain they could never afford. Part 7, Northern Lights and Quiet Nights. The aftermath was not a loud explosion, but a slow, quiet collapse. I heard about it in bits and pieces from my friend Dave, whose cousin is a member of the Allisons Country Club. The story of the Christmas reckoning, as it came to be known, ripped through their social circle like a wildfire. Robert and Alina Allison, who prized their reputation above all else, were utterly humiliated. They were not angry with me. They were furious with their daughter for bringing such a vulgar, public disgrace upon their family name. The fountain of their money, like mine, dried up overnight. Mark and Tiffany were ruined. Without my support and without the Allisons, their glossy lifestyle was impossible to maintain. The first to go was the luxury SUV. Then came the frantic downsizing. They had to sell the big house on the South Hill at a loss, its marble countertops and brushed gold fixtures not enough to hide the stench of desperation. They moved into a small, rented townhouse in a less fashionable part of town. Tiffany's Facebook page went silent. There were no more posts about weekend getaways or organic brunches. Her carefully curated world had been repossessed. Mark called me once about a month later. His voice was hollow, defeated. He tried to apologize, but the words were clumsy, full of excuses. He was sorry for how things played out, sorry that I felt unappreciated. It was a coward's apology, and I had no time for it. "I hope you land on your feet, son," I told him, my voice devoid of malice or pity. "It's time you learned how." I wished him luck and hung up. I felt no triumph, only a deep, abiding sense of peace. The foundation I had provided for so long was gone, and now they would have to learn to build their own. My life, in contrast, blossomed. The silence in my house was no longer lonely. It was serene. In May, as the last of the spring chill left the air, I packed my bags. I didn't pack my old work boots. I bought a new pair of comfortable walking shoes. I didn't drive my old truck to the airport. I hired a car. The cruise ship was magnificent, a floating city of light and glass. My suite was larger than my first apartment. It had a king-sized bed, a marble bathroom, and a sprawling private balcony. Waiting for me on the table, just as Brenda from the cruise line had promised, was not champagne, but a bottle of 18-year-old Macallan single malt scotch and a single crystal glass. For 14 days, I sailed through a world I had only ever seen on television. I stood on my balcony, a glass of scotch in my hand, and watched mountains of ancient ice calve into the turquoise sea. The sound was like thunder, a powerful, primal roar that made me feel wonderfully small and insignificant. I saw humpback whales breach, their massive bodies exploding from the water in a display of pure, unadulterated joy. I saw bald eagles soaring against a sky so vast and blue it hurt to look at. I took the excursions. I rode a tiny float plane over misty fjords, went salmon fishing in a rushing river, and rode a train through the stunning Alaskan wilderness. I spoke to strangers, sharing stories with a retired teacher from Ohio and a cattle rancher from Texas. I ate what I wanted when I wanted. I read books, I napped in the afternoon sun, and I thought about Susan. I felt her with me, not as a ghost of grief, but as a warm, happy presence. I brought her dream to life, and in doing so, I was finally living my own. On the last night of the cruise, the ship sailed into a remote channel, far from the light pollution of any city. The captain came over the intercom and announced that conditions were perfect for the aurora borealis. I put on my coat and went out onto my private balcony, and then I saw it. At first, it was just a faint, greenish haze. But then it grew, swelling into vast, shimmering curtains of light that danced across the entire expanse of the night sky. Ribbons of green, pink, and purple writhed and flowed in a silent, celestial ballet. It was the most beautiful, awe-inspiring thing I had ever seen. I stood there for hours, leaning against the railing, the cold air on my face. I thought about the house I had built, the son I had raised, and the life I had lived. I had spent so many years being a foundation for others, carrying their weight, bearing their burdens. And now, under the impossible beauty of the northern lights, I was just Frank. A man free from obligation, at peace with his past, and looking forward to his future. I raised my glass of scotch to the dancing lights, to the memory of my wife, and to the quiet, satisfying click of a closed door. I was no longer a foundation. I was the whole damn house, and the view was spectacular. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Share your thoughts on what happened in the comments below. To listen to the next story, click on the video appearing on your screen now.